Welcome, everyone. My name is Kristen Coomer, and I'm the president of the Seattle Metals Guild. And we're excited to have you here with us tonight for the fourth and final installment of our Emerging Artists lecture series. We've enjoyed hearing from, by the time we're done tonight, a dozen different emerging artists in the field. And we're thrilled to have your participation in learning more about them and their work. So thanks for being here. Before we get started, I would love to tell you about a few things, if you will indulge me. I'm going to share my screen to do it because this is the easiest way for me. I want to show you, here's tonight's event, but also, did you know that on Sunday, if you're in Seattle, we're having an opening reception for our exhibition. It's called From Wave to Shining Wave. And it's a celebration of Philip Baldwin, who ran a company called Shining Wave Metals. And in this show, we'll be featuring works by members. And oh gosh, this thing can be awkward that it's auto scrolls. But you can see that each of the works features mokume gane, either made by Philip or by other artists. And so that exhibition is also going to be online. And I believe almost all of the works in the show are going to be for sale. So whether you're in Seattle or farther afield, be sure to keep an eye out on our website for that to go live. And then I'd also like to call your attention to our Established Artist Grant Program. This is a program that we've offered every year for 30 years, I believe. One member of the Guild is honored with an award each year, and this year we're offering one to an established artist. And applications for that program opens on June 30th. Amy here is our committee chair for that work. So yeah, if that is something that piques your interest, please visit our site. And then I also want to tell you, we've got our symposium coming up in October, and it's a ways away, but if you register today, you'll get a discount. We have an early bird discount on offer right now. And we are proud to be able to offer pricing for online and in person, where you can say, you know, I'm a member, I'm an emerging artist or a student, or I'm not a member, and your price updates based on that. So we're offering a lower price for emerging artists and for students as well. Anyway, that's happening. You should be aware. I hope you'll join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then I also want to call your attention to, which tab is it? Here. I'd like you to know, I'm so proud that we've been able to raise some additional funds. We have our series tonight sponsored by Art Jewelry Forum and Rio Grande. We're really thankful for that. Through our donation program for this series, we're just $50 away from being able to double what we're paying each of our speakers. Our payment is incredibly modest. It was important to us that we be able to offer our speakers some small amount of money for your time and energy. So if you're able to, I'm going to share this link in the chat and invite you to, let's see, I'm going to stop sharing. Invite you, everyone, to contribute to our fund. So all of the proceeds go directly to our speakers, all 12 of them. So thank you so much for that. And that's it for my announcements. So I'll pass it over to you, Amy, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you so much.
Yes, hello, and welcome everyone to our final Emerging Artist Speaker Series event of this year. Maybe best is always saved for the last. I don't know. You guys can decide. So tonight we have three more exciting speakers that will share their art journey with us today. So today, before we start, I just want to remind you that there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or maybe it's oriented a different way depending on your laptop or computer. But please feel free at any time during any of the talks to put in a question into the Q&A, and then we will take Q&A at the end of the session. Okay, so to kick us off, we're going to start out with Bryce Wall. Let me tell you, this man is very hard to find on the internet. So thank goodness for Kristen for helping me get some info for him. So let's see, Bryce is based out of San Diego currently. He is a MFA candidate at San Diego State University. He's also a teacher assistant at Haystack, and I believe there's some Haystack folks joining us today. He uses metalsmithing to explore material connections with paper, wood, stone, and print. And he explores ideas of memory, decay, and masculinity. So, Bryce, would you like to share with us your story?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. Let me just pull up my screen here and start my timer. Perfect. Excellent. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to Kristen and to Amy and to the Seattle Metals Guild for hosting this amazing series of talks. And it's such an honor to be here with such an amazing group of colleagues who've been everything before, and I'm quite excited to see who comes next. Um, and as um, Amy also mentioned, I'm here at Haystack, which is such an honor, and you'll have to forgive me. I'm presenting from essentially a converted broom closet, so it might be a little bit echoey. And I'm also currently fighting off a little mini head cold. So I'll ask you to just bear with me if I sound a little nasally or a little bit head foggy as we go through this. So, a little bit about me. Um, On your left is a photo of me and my family. They are incredibly important to me and play a big role in my practice as well. Specifically, right now, my twin brother, you can see there. We'll talk a little bit more about him later. His name's Ryan. And then on the right is an image of me from what I've been doing for more or less the past decade, which is being a professional guide. So for the past 8 years, I've spent working on and off as a mountaineering guide in Alaska and Washington. So before I moved down to San Diego to start my MFA program, I was actually living in Ballard. Shout out to anyone from Ballard right now. And I dearly miss Seattle. So it's such a pleasure to be sharing this journey with the Seattle Metals Guild. On the right is an image of me on the top of my first 16,000-foot peak in Alaska with one of my friends. And then on the left is an image from the year prior in which we got rescued off that mountain in a helicopter. So my fun fact, I've been involved in 3 different helicopter rescues in my life. So today I'm just going to go through really quickly a little bit of my undergraduate work, what I was doing beforehand, and then transition into what this past year has looked like. So my undergraduate work, I attended Skidmore College and graduated in 2020. Skidmore College is in upstate New York, for those who don't know. And my work was primarily technically oriented and oriented to technical excellence and exploring materials through wide array through a wide variety. So this piece is a full-sized picture that could be used. It's based on my love of Bauhaus and that kind of classic mid-century design. It is nickel-plated copper. It's about 12 inches tall, 4 inches long, and curly-eyed maple tucked in there as well. Moving from there, I part of what I was really interested in my undergraduate work was combining a mixed array of materials. So not only metal, but paper, wood, whatever I could get my hands on into small scale sculpture. So this guy is only about 4 inches tall and only about 1.5 inches wide. Sterling silver, copper plated brass, and paper in there as well. So some of the work you'll see is really inspired by boat forms, by the classic wood boats, sails, cars. Before I wanted to get into mountaineering guiding, I wanted to be a sailor for a long time. So that's where a lot of this comes from. And then I've also always been really interested in exploring form and process. So one aspect of what I was doing as an undergrad, which I'm excited to explore this coming year as well, was some printmaking and bookmaking and book binding. So this is actually an entirely hollow book. So the thing that looks like a bridge is actually fully a bridge. It's bound the entire way through to hold it in place, essentially turning this small book into its own free-floating sculpture. This is also all done on the letterpress, which I have kind of a love for taking these industrial mass-producing forms and techniques and doing them once. So this is a one of one, even though it took hours and hours and hours to set all the type and get everything set up, it was printed once and never again. And the final piece I'll talk about from this period of my life was my senior thesis project here. So this is about 12 inches by 12 inches, about a foot all the way around, and it's ebony and sterling silver fabrication. So I approached this work and this kind of senior capstone process as I would as if I were a guildsman or a trade member trying to show off my capstone project and everything that I learned into one final extravagant object. And again, in my undergraduate work, I was primarily interested in sculptural forms. So this is all inlaid sterling into ebony, all carved, laminate bent ebony, cast silver, fabricated silver. So a lot of time and effort went into this. It was also a little complicated by the fact that 2020, as I'm sure we all remember, was the fine year of COVID. So I was kicked off campus partway through this and had to finish this in my mother's basement. And I believe she's watching tonight, so thank you again for that, Mother. Um, so with all that in mind, what am I up to now? Well, this year, this entire process has been a really exciting time for me. In between 2020 and now, before I started my MFA program, I took 4 years fully off from any sort of creative practice whatsoever. So the work I've been doing now is the first work that I've made in 4 years and is 4 years of built up energy and excitement and anticipation. So being able to be here to share with what I'm doing right now with you guys, especially doing that from Haystack, this amazing place, is such a privilege. So what I'm doing right now is a lot of different things. So I'm going to kind of give you a little like sampling platter of everything of what this past year has looked like for me. So this piece here is called Keybox. And it was the first piece that I made again in 4 years, and my first piece at San Diego as part of my MFA candidacy there. So, as I mentioned before, one of the things I've always been interested in is process. As a metalsmith, as a jeweler, process is everything in what we do. It's without it, you can't accomplish these amazing works you're about to see today from all of these lovely speakers. So one of my favorite processes has always been sand casting. Again, I love these industrial mass-producing processes, but finding ways to turn them into one of ones, especially the use in art jewelry and these fine metal sculptures. So with this work that I'm at here, I was interested in finding a way of bringing more of the process, what it looks like to make, into the final image, into the final work that you see in front of you. So I custom fabricated a wood flask for this, which I then imprinted a set of keys and poured directly into it, and that's all displayed together in the final object. So you can see the heat patina on the metal cup, the little drip from the pour going over the edge, and all of the flashing left in place of the final object. If you were to get up close to this, in those tube rivets, you would also see remnants of the sand stuffed down there from the casting process, and sand burnt into the actual form of the keys themselves. Um, and from this, I started to expand a little bit and go bigger and go a little bit crazier as well. So with this image, this piece is called Fading. It's about 6 feet wide and is essentially a multi-compartment sand casting flask, all contained in one piece. So when I was making this, the first casting was the one on the far right, and then I took that casting, did not alter it at all, moved it into the flask on the left, imprinted it, cast it again, and then repeated that process over and over and over and over again until your result is on the odd form on the left. So with this, I was really interested in the way that we think about perfect processes, right? There's a way to sandcast perfectly every single time. And that's not really interesting to me. So with this, it's about compounding error or compounding imperfection and the way that those build up over time until you're left with something totally unexpected and totally different. And especially coming from a metals background, a jewelry background, right? Perfection is everything, is what we strive for. So it's been also a way for me to free up space and energy into my practice and allow a little bit of the unknown, a little bit of the wild back into what I do, which has been super exciting. So one of the more exciting turns in what I've been doing now, and one of the more unexpected turns is kind of coming back to traditional jewelry and metalsmithing objects and jewelry in particular as well. And I was kind of always interested in sculpture, maybe more than jewelry or these kind of traditional objects. But I found that these have been really resonating in my practice and have been really speaking to what I've been doing recently. So this is a twin spoon. So as I mentioned, I have a twin brother. We're identical twins. And there are some very unique lived experiences of being a twin. And one of those experiences is that when we're together, people always want to see us right next to each other and to marvel at these two identical beings. It's kind of what I think of as the zoo effect. So this is actually it's a baby feeding spoon with two heads that's designed to, in use, smash the heads of the users together so they're right next to each other to kind of force that identical interaction that people are looking for. This is forged sterling silver. Another piece that's kind of exploring this same idea of being a twin is this pair of earrings called copy earrings. So again, one of the interesting aspects of being a twin is whenever I tell someone I'm a twin, one of the first questions is invariably, who's older, right? Are you the older twin or are you the younger twin? And after some time thinking about this, I kind of realized at least what I get from that question is who's the original, right? Who's the original twin? Who's the copy, right? Who's the other, the heir and the spare, right? So for me, especially when we think of original, second, first, second copy, there's an inherent value judgment placed on that, right? Especially there's the older sibling, the younger sibling. So this is a carved wood piece. It's nice wood, nice exotic hardwood, but then cast in sterling silver. So exploring that dynamic between value, like an object of greater value, an object of lesser value, first and second, and what that really means. And for context, I am the second twin, so that should give you some idea of where I'm coming from on that. So this this slide is to give some context more broadly on what I'm thinking about as well. And before we get into the kind of the next and final image and work that I'll talk about with you today. So one of the most, a deep area of my research right now has been on embodiment, which is very broadly the role that the body plays in cognition, right? So it's the way that our body acts as a site of knowing and as like a site of engaging in the world. And we all exist, we all partake in methods of embodiment without knowing it or knowing it, right? Jewelry is a form of embodiment, makeup, hair, clothing. And the image on the right, I found during my research this past year, and I've been thinking about it a lot. So it's an image from the 1800s for men's corsets, right? And the men's corset was used as a way to fit your body, like similar to a women's corset, in this ideal standard and to fit it into this ideal standard for the British Empire, right? It's for officers and gentlemen. So it's this version of masculinity that becomes something that oppresses both you and others. So it got me thinking about the way that we use jewelry and embodiment and what those signal about us and the people that we interact with. So one of the projects that that's kind of taken me into is what I've been kind of calling the piercing project. So piercings are more or less commonplace these days, but depending on where they are in the body and who wears them, they signal something that we may or may not know. A certain type of queerness, a certain type of liberalness, a certain something that that person is trying to get across. But what does that mean when we think about that off a body, or what does it mean when we think about it onto surrogate bodies? So, with this project, I've been going around San Diego and adding piercings onto telephone poles. So, trying to make these direct engagements in the environment to hopefully provoke some thought about what we're putting out there. And the final work I'll talk about is this piece called Good Boy. It is a sterling silver dog choke training collar with a vintage silk necktie. Um, Everything is engraved. Believe you me, engraving wire is not very fun. I would not recommend doing it. Um, but this piece has really been really exciting for me, and I'm building on that research into embodiment. So again, thinking about the ways that these masculine archetypes are passed down and trained into us from a young age, these ways of being and these ways of acting and dressing and looking, and kind of the pain and discomfort that comes along with that training and comes along with that way of being and existing in the world. And that's really what I've been up to right now. Um, if you're interested in following along what I'm doing, my Instagram's right there. My twin brother will be visiting me in San Diego, and he doesn't know this yet, but I'm going to try and get him to use that spoon with me. So if you want to see that photo, well, hopefully it'll come soon. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Bryce. I loved seeing the engraving on the Springer collar. I have one, I mean, for my dogs, but I'm happy to send that your way if you'd like to keep practicing on that wire engraving. Um, Great. All right, thank you very much. We are now going to move on to our next speaker. Before we do, just a reminder, Q&A section down below. If you have questions about Bryce or anything that Fernanda is going to talk about in a second, please feel to drop those in the Q&A box. So let's move on. Fernanda Gaspar, also from San Diego. I always am like blown away at the weird connections that I don't know, how Kristen puts these people together, but it's kind of like, oh, is it two cities? Like whatever. Anyways, so let's see. Fernanda, bachelor's degree from San Diego State University as well, where Bryce is attending, in business administration with a minor in jewelry and metalwork. Also, she's an artist in resident at Pocosin right now, and I know that we've got Pocosin, I believe, on the line as well, watching. So shout out to you guys. She's also teaching at the San Diego Jewelry Academy, as well as coordinating the summer medals session at Idlewild. arts. So we've got those people on the line. Hello to you as well. And finally, her work blends an appreciation of craftsmanship tradition with storytelling for making meaning-filled objects.
Thank you, Amy, for the intro, and hello, everyone. If this is your first time hearing about me, welcome, and thank you so much for being here or watching the recording. Um, for the people that do know me and are here, thank you for supporting me, and a special thanks to the Guild for giving me this platform to speak on. So for this talk, I wanted to shift the spotlight away from my work a little bit. But if you're curious, I would encourage you to check it out. Here are my links. You can find me on my Instagram, Fernanda Studio. And I'll have this lame slide at the end. So if you want to check it out later, you can do so. So now you might be wondering, what is she going to talk about? Well, I want to share a small pocket of wisdom that I've gathered over the years. I know a lot of us, whether you're a student, educator, parent, sibling, friend, and of course, a member of the community, I hope that my story resonates with you. And today I'll share how these four things have brought me here to be able to speak in front of you today. Experimentation, single decisions, instances where one person just like changed the course of my career, and the power of my community. So as artists, craftspeople, experimentation is at the heart of what we do. It's what happens in the bench. And I found that the same thing happens in my life. So in high school, I was working at In-N-Out and throughout college too a little bit. And I was making great money, especially here in California, but I wasn't sure about what to study. So I went into community college, deciding to pursue a business administration degree. And after 2 semesters of community college, I was like, you know what? There has to be more to this. Let me experiment. Let me try something new. And I saw a door opening when I found out I had a gap in the last semester of my community college. So I made one decision and I decided I was going to take a crafts course. And it changed everything. Suddenly, I was creating conceptually, working with mediums and techniques I'd never tried before, and I was hooked. This was during the pandemic, and that class sparked something in me. Thanks to YouTube University, I taught myself how to bead and even incorporated some of my beading into that lamp project that I had made. Um, and I heard Ben Stiller say in an interview, he's like a director, he said, someone throws an idea at you and you think, wow, I never considered that, but you stay open-minded. And that's how I felt back then, because at the time I had to decide where to transfer after community college, and I was in between two colleges in San Diego. And one person, Kaya Rainbolt, my professor then suggested, why not go to SDSU? They have a great jewelry program, and because of your beadwork, you seem really interested in jewelry. And I was so immersed in my business degree, but I stayed open-minded, and a degree requires you to take a lot of classes. So I was like, how am I going to fit jewelry into the schedule? But I stayed open-minded and I considered the idea of keep pursuing jewelry. So I went to SDSU and I took drawing prerequisites on the left while juggling my business classes on the right. And I wanted jewelry at the time, though. I wasn't getting into jewelry yet. I had to take my prerequisites. So for this, I decided another decision. I decided to leave my In-N-Out job for a jewelry assembly job. And I took a pay cut, which kind of hurt, but I really just wanted to immerse myself into the craft and just to be around jewelry all day. And I learned techniques, overlooked techniques such as just like opening and closing jump rings. So that was great. And I continued to take my prerequisites at school, which were fun, but they made my way to jewelry small or slow. But I learned so much as an artist. I was able to draw. I didn't know I could draw, and I was able to come up with ideas. And then came another turning point, another decision I had to take. And I decided to go, super simple, this one's simple. I decided to go to the jewelry sale at school. It's the jewelry co-op organizes it every fall semester, and it was my first semester at SDSU. And I decided to attend it, and that's when I met Sandra Sherman, and she is the department head for SDSU Jewelry. And I went up to the table to check out for a necklace that I wanted. And I was wearing one of my beaded necklaces that day. And she sparked a conversation and she was like, "Hey, I really like your necklace." And you can imagine how I felt. I was like, "Oh, she likes my necklace." And she was like, "Did you make it?" And I said yes. And she said that I was probably should probably take jewelry classes. And I told her how I was on my way there, but I still had to take another prerequisite. And she suggested if she could just waive the class and then I could get started. And I put that drawing there because she planted a seed and I just grew into who I am today. So one person really changed the way things are going for me. So it all began. The next 2 semesters, I dove into jewelry making, exploring the basic techniques, making conceptual work, which is what I loved from being in that community college class. And um, time passed by, and another semester, Carrie and Quick secured a grant that brought visiting artists to our program. I helped as the social media manager for that semester, and I got to use a little bit of my business degree and that management. Um, and I just like fell in love with how we were creating a community and how together we amplified our creativity and how we all organized this and all the effort we put in really came back to us in return with all the techniques we were learning and the artists we were meeting. And later that summer, in my community, sent me to Haystack with the help of Sandra and Carrie. I got a scholarship to go to Haystack for the summer. And like many others, I felt like Haystack was life-changing. And I got to experiment techniques that I feel like now are reflected in the work that I make today. And a year later, I craved more. I was like, I need to go back. And I decided to book myself a little craft school tour. And I went to Idlewild, Poquoson, Touchstone. I went to Idlewild because, again, Carrie nominated me as an assistant. Um, and then at Poquoson as Touchstone, I got scholarships and I just went all over traveling. And it was amazing. I made amazing people. And I just, again, loved how there was community and everybody there was to share and learn. Um, so right before I went to Poquoson, I had just gotten a rejection letter for their 9-month residency. And I felt when I was there, I had this thought, intrusive thoughts, and it's just like, oh my God, they're gonna know, like that's the girl that didn't get in, that didn't get the residency. But I just shook it off and I was like, you know what? Don't even, they're probably not even thinking about that. And I went anyway, and I had a great week with everybody there. And then the last week, or the last day of the session, Eric, the medals coordinator at Poquoson, he told me that if I wanted, they would give me an opportunity to interview the next week. So, despite the shaky reception at Touchstone, I prepared with my new friends that I made in this tour, Celine and Gretchen, and I got the residency. Oh, I got the residency. So the 9-month residency was so amazing. These months got cut short to 7 months, but they were still transformative. I made so much work and I was a worker machine. I mean, I explored incorporating my beadwork to metalsmithing. I tried different mediums, revisited paper mache, and I learned ceramics and woodworking, which I had never gotten the chance to do. And again, if you want to see more of what I make, here are my links. But these are some of the previews of what I've made in my residency. But then life happened, and my family had visited me in North Carolina, and we got into a pretty bad car accident. So that's why my residency got cut short. And this led me to leave early and road trip back to San Diego. We couldn't fly, so we drove an RV there to the left, and we drove literally from North Carolina all the way to California, seeing a bunch of states that we'd never seen. Visiting Buc-ee's, it felt like a Disneyland to me. I thought that place was awesome, so I had to shout it out. And I know this all sounds scary and sad, but the accident really shifted a lot of my family dynamics. So, although it feels like a negative experience, there has been so much positive coming out of it. And I feel like after it happening, I've been trying to figure out the reason why and just seeing how this plays into my life now. Um, and my community showed up for me. My friends organized a GoFundMe. A lot of the members of the community showed up for me. So it felt really good to just know that, okay, they like my community has got me and I will get them back, you know? So you might be wondering what's going on now after coming back to San Diego. I did artist lectures. I did a resident lecture with my fellow residents, Lily and Riley. I participated in an exhibition organized by my friend Xavier Vasquez, and I put two of my older pieces there. And I actually went to North Carolina because I couldn't bring all of my stuff with me traveling in an RV. So I just went back and packed everything up and said my proper goodbyes. So that was very nice to get that proper goodbye and not wheel out on a wheelchair, just like I was walking everywhere, getting all my stuff, all good. And right now, I'm at Idlewild and I am coordinating the summer program here. Um, Again, because of the people that have been with me throughout my path in art, um, I am able to coordinate this program. Going way back, the first person that ever suggested me doing any technician job or anything like that was Leslie Show, and she nominated me to be one of the technicians at school. And because of that, Carrie then was like, "Yes, let's do it." So then I was the tech there, and that gave me the confidence to be able to apply to other technician jobs, other places. I worked for the Santiago Jewelry Academy as a TA, and then I went to Idlewild last year and I loved it so much. I was like, I have to come back and I can do more than just being a TA. So talking with Eddie, the coordinator then, I was like, hey, I would love to come back next year and do more. What can I do? And he said that he didn't really want to coordinate in person anymore. And he suggested if we wanted to coordinate together, and I would be here in person, and we would just plan things together and utilize both of our powerful brains to do it. So that's why I'm here at Idlewild coordinating a program. And I just wanted to share how your role is powerful in this community and sharing with people and getting them opportunities and just being a good person to the members of your community is really powerful. And I love to say that you have to kind of mess around, fuck around a little bit, find out where you can go. And at the bottom, it cut out, but you always have to have a plan. I always love to experiment, try new things, but always having a goal in mind, seeing it through. And that's it. Thank you so much. And I will leave you my links here again in case you want to find my work. And please feel free to message me or talk to me if you want to know about anything around my work.
Thank you, Fernanda. Thank you very much. And it's lovely to hear how, the people in the community really were able to support you and recommend you and kind of take you from one place to another. And that's always helpful to hear that artists helping out other artists in promotion.
Yes, I also want to mention you're still awkwardly highlighted here, and I'm not finding how to undo that.
Never leaving now. Good luck.
But I do want to mention, oh my gosh, that Fernanda's GoFundMe link is part of that QR code, and I encourage you to consider donating because we all know it takes a good community to help us through these hard times. So thank you for reminding us of that, Fernanda.
Great. All right. Well, hopefully you're not staring at my face too long while Krista figures out how to unhighlight me. But we will go ahead and proceed with our final artist of the evening slash series. So bring it home, Laurie. We've got Laurie Gyarmathy. She's an artist based in Seattle. She graduated from the Art Institute of Chicago, specializing in interdisciplinary figurative work. From there, she went on to create a luxury lingerie brand called Toad Lily, which showcases intimate objects that play with the body. So kind of made me think, drawing parallels back to Bryce's whole, embodiment and corsets. We've got corsets and belts probably theme tying in here. And then currently she continues this kind of intimate objects that play with the body in her current work, which where she explores translating the fluidity of fabric into metal with her new jewelry brand, Unfurl Studio. So, Laurie, take us home.
Thank you. Let's see. So, lots of similarities between all of us tonight, which is exciting. And I love the way that that happens. But first of all, just wanted to thank the Seattle Metals Guild for the invitation to be part of this lecture series. I'm very honored to be asked to present. I've been so inspired by everyone that has spoken thus far and everyone's stories, so different and so interesting on their own right. So I am the oldest emerging artist of the series with a very unconventional path to jewelry metals that I am excited to share with you. So a little bit about me. I am also from California. I am a Southern California girl. Been living in Seattle for about 14 years after a very long stint in the Midwest. So I've always been an artist, but I'm really only now embracing the identity of being an artist. I am a multi-passionate visual artist, storyteller, entrepreneur, and brand owner. I discovered jewelry making about 4 years ago and really started working with metal as a medium about 2 years ago and launched my new brand, Unfurl Studio, at the end of last year. So little Laurie wanted to be a costume designer and an artist. I grew up in a family with a very strong narrative that it is unsafe to build a career as an artist. Creativity was for a hobby, not a profession. So living on my own since I was 19, working full-time and taking art classes part-time, being an artist seemed very far away. When I was almost 25, I received the gift of being laid off from that safe job. Days later, on my actual 25th birthday, a friend of mine asked me if I would be willing to drive with her from Los Angeles to Detroit, and we could visit Chicago. And I had a lightning bolt moment. I could just leave. I could just leave and never come back. It was time to take a chance on myself. So I donated everything I owned, and I took my art portfolio, my sewing machine, and my cat. And I moved to Chicago, sight unseen, and applied to art school. It was January, and I didn't even own a coat. I applied to the School of the Art Institute and was shocked to get in. This was a pivotal time for me and really shaped who I was as a young person. I was all in with being an artist with a capital A. Early themes in my work were gestural movement, fluidity, and the objectification and deconstruction of the human body. So I'm sharing a few samples of some early work. The image on the left is a detail of an oil painting that was criticized for being too conventionally beautiful in the age of 90s shock value art. The image in the middle, like Bryce, is also a corset-like structure, creating an impossibly idealized silhouette with a cage of chicken wire and rusted steel wool. And the image on the right is a detail of a series of skins that I created where I deconstructed the figure down actually to the skin, where I was rubbing panels of silk with spices and rust until they frayed. And I hand stitched these panels together and to create a large textile that I pinned to the wall like a specimen. So living in Chicago was really hard. It's a total culture shift from Los Angeles, and I didn't know a soul. I struggled with how flat and dense it was. Somebody told me I was going to miss the mountains, and I figured I'd miss the beach and the weather, but I did. I missed that spatialness of living in Southern California. I was also harassed on the street and on public transportation a lot. And this really heightened my anxiety and caused severe panic attacks. My work became a place that I could take my power back. I started playing with the idea with the body as both desirable and repulsive. And I began exploring materials that were at once beautiful and repugnant. So I used gut, like they used to stuff sausages, which takes on very different properties when wet or dry, as a way to explore our inner and outer skins. And I also became fascinated with hair. I stitched dense beauty marks onto netting that I created veils that wrapped around the face. And I also crocheted hair with jewelry wire to create gilded cages that confined the head. My final thesis included stills from a video I took interacting with the hair pieces and gut, specifically my face. And these photos were abstracted by enlarging or cutting away to the smallest detail. I adorned them by piping them with silk and velvet ribbons. I enjoy the discomfort of the intimacy required to interact with the work. This period of time was very prolific, but also challenging. As I mentioned before, I was really struggling with anxiety, with belief in myself and my work, and that I could build a life as an artist. And I chose not to move forward with an MFA. Instead, like many artists, I took a corporate job in advertising and I started a family. So I mentioned when I left LA, I made sure to take my sewing machine. So I've always sewn my own clothes, a creative hobby, and a necessity when what you like and what you can afford are two very different things. So while I was an undergrad, I also worked at the Chicago Historical Society in their costume department. And I was fascinated with the structure of garments, their architecture. The vintage couture that I cataloged were really works of art in their own right. I sort of fell into making lingerie when my kids were young. I was in my late 30s and I made a pair of very fancy pasties for a friend as a joke. I fused layers of silk together to craft really dramatic flowers that I beaded the centers of. They were fabulous, and more importantly, they were fun to make. I decided to sell them on Etsy, which was brand new at the time. I started making matching garter belts and then started getting requests for knickers and bras. And while I've always sewn my own clothes, I had to teach myself pattern drafting. Did you know that a bra has over 20 components? They are a feat of structural engineering. My lingerie brand, Toad Lily, was an indie darling. It was a wide open space for independent brands at the time. I received press and magazine editorials, and even famed photographer Ellen von Unwerth pulled my pieces for two separate photo shoots. As a fashion brand, you're expected to release seasonal collections. I went from making made-to-measure pieces on Etsy to designing and producing two comprehensive collections each year, spring, summer, and autumn, winter. My work was unique and beautifully designed, but extremely labor intensive. I hand dyed all of the findings to match my silks. I also hand painted and beaded many of the pieces. Even the bras were lined with silk. They were so fancy, I couldn't find anyone to help me with the production sewing. Because I couldn't outsource production, my business wasn't scalable. Also, retailers want to know that you have longevity. So even though they seek out new talent, they usually wait at least 2 years before placing orders. Again, this reinforced my anxiety about being able to build a creative business that was sustainable. I learned some valuable lessons from this period that I have translated to my jewelry business. I learned critical success does not equal commercial success. I learned how important it is to consider labor when designing a piece and how to scale production. But most importantly, I learned the power of storytelling and how important it is to have a distinctive brand voice. I folded my business when my husband was diagnosed with cancer. 2 years later, when he passed away, I translated those storytelling skills where when was taking care of my kids. First as a trend writer for the intimates industry, and then as a corporate marketing storyteller. So the large gaps between creative periods left me with so much regret. It was hard to know how to re-enter making again. I took a sculpture class just before COVID hit. Everyone worked small, maybe 8, 10 inches, and I worked big. I created a huge undulating seaweed sculpture that was at least 2 feet wide. It was so large, I couldn't get it in a base heavy enough to support it. But I loved the physicality of making. Creating the armature left my nails broken and my hands filthy, and I felt like an artist again. It was actually really emotional. I explored jewelry as a smaller scale sculpture medium. This felt like an accessible entry point between art and fashion. Initially, I started playing with thin strips of paper to see how many little sculptures I could create within restraints of size and material. I translated those into strips of metal and then wire, but I was still really drawn to fluidity, and it was a natural transition for me to move to wax. I found it to be much more intuitive and tactile. I enjoyed the sensuousness of working with the material. I took a lost wax casting class to see how far I could push the medium in size and dimensionality. My current process involves exploring gestural movement with strips of sheet wax that I smooth onto wood mandrels, where I trim and I add and I build up with wax and take away, connect with other strips to create large dimensional pieces. I really enjoy the freedom of sculpting in space. I look for this sweet spot of intentionality and spontaneity that's exciting to me. When I receive that initial casting back, I'll push the shape even further. So I anneal, I bend, I sand until the dynamism of the form is revealed. I've ruined many pieces searching for that magic moment. I launched my debut jewelry brand late last year at the age of 57. My work as an artist and a lingerie designer informs my jewelry design. It's dramatic, impactful, and tactile. I look to translate the fluidity of fabric into metal in the expressive form of ribbons about to be undone. I enjoy creating sculptural work that is sensual and solid. You can feel its weight and its presence. It's meant to feel powerful, transformative. It's also experiential, with the body becoming part of the canvas. The lengths of silk cord wrap around the throat, the waist, the finials at the ends of the cord sway and swing against the body and feel so good to rub with the thumb. It's important to me that the pieces feel as good as they look. My pieces go through an exhaustive finishing process to be seductively smooth and glossy. The name Unfurl celebrates the power of expansion, unfurling into our most powerful, radiant selves. In this third deep dive of creativity in my life, I've realized that there is a thread of commonality in my work, even though the mediums have been wildly different. In my quest to stretch myself creatively and to free myself from the fears that kept me playing small, I've created a body of work that celebrates the transformative power of adornment. From the gritty hair and wire cages of my 20s to the glamorous silk ties of my 30s and 40s, and now to the molten metal ribbons of my 50s, it's always been about being free, strong, and powerful. With each iteration, I learned to let go of limiting beliefs, to trust in myself and the timing of my life, and that it's never too late to choose yourself and your art. I am a proud late bloomer because who wants to peak early anyway? My goal is to peak as late as possible and to always be learning. So speaking of learning, what's next? I've spent most of this year since launching just laying the foundational work for growing a business. Even though it's taken me away from the making, it's really creative in its own right. I really enjoy the entrepreneurship side of being an artist. It's part of sharing my work, gaining visibility, and growing trust with my audience. I am looking forward to finding more balance, though, that supports my creative growth and to not be too attached to this first collection, to continue to iterate. One of the things I started experimenting with is working at a smaller scale. Like I said, I've always worked large. I love large, but I was recently asked to create a charm for a collective project. And I had to translate something that was 3.5 inches down to an inch while still, maintaining that fluid dynamism that I've been honing. Also, like Karen Jones, who was the first speaker of this series, I too am called to bring color into the world. I'm very inspired by the form and color of Art Nouveau jewelry, enamel jewelry. There is a Lalique ring that is my North Star. So I just took my first enamel class. It was just about play and it was so fun. It was the first time I just played without worrying about whether it was good enough to sell or good enough to share. I'm also curious about how to potentially incorporate stones in my work, how to wrap the metal around the stones in ways that are dynamic and unexpected. I'm excited to see where the path leads. Thank you again to the Seattle Metals Guild for asking me to be part of this experience and to share my story with you. I'm very grateful to be part of this community.
Thank you, Laurie. That was such an evolution, I think, seeing your work from the very beginning and how it went from like covering, anxiety and kind of constrained, feelings, and then kind of moving on to this like empowerment and this definite like flow and confidence within yourself is very visible. So thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, well, we have heard all the good news, so I'm curious if we have any questions from the audience. So feel free to drop it in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will get those answered. I do always have some questions prepared for you guys ahead of time because I get to ask them. So I'm going to start out with just kind of per person a question each for you. Um, Bryce, I am curious, what came first for you? Because you definitely have a love of the outdoors and the kind of pioneering spirit, and then there's definitely the art piece. Do you have a sense of, kind of what came first, or, instead of
Y-
asking you which twin came first, I'm going to ask you which art
yeah,
slash
that's
outdoors came
that's a great question. I would say that it's hard to say exactly which came first, but I would probably have to say art.
first.
I grew up loving art as well as the outdoors, but I remember taking my first jewelry course at Snow Farm, which is a craft school in Western Massachusetts, right next where I grew up, and just instantly falling in love. And it's been really exciting to get back into that space and kind of like go back to the first love, as it were.
Hmm. Okay, thanks, Bryce. All right. Let's see. Fernanda, I'm curious, if you could just do a little, I'm putting you on the spot, a little quick compare and contrast, because it seems like you've toured many of the big craft schools, kind of if you can kind of do a kind of how do they kind of differ that, they're different vibes, different.
Yeah. Well, each one definitely has something going for it. That, whether it's the space or what you see around it, or even how you get there, some of them are a little bit more challenging to get to, for example. But I think like that was part of what I loved, just being like, okay, this is a challenge. Like I need to figure out how I'm gonna get there. And that in itself, I feel like proved me that I wanted to be there and that I would get there. For example, to Pocosin, that I think that shows just like the commitment to it.
Mhm.
And obviously the food, all of them have the best food ever.
Like weddings, it's all you remember. It's like, I don't know who got
Yes.
married, what they're wearing, but I do remember what I ate.
Yes, all of them have great, amazing food, and then the size of the school, you get either a more intimate setting or a larger school, and they're all great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not going to tell us what your favorite one is, I'm seeing.
No, I'm not gonna tell you what my favorite one is. Well, Haystack is really awesome. Haystack is a really awesome place. I think that was just like my first experience, and it was like emotional being there. I was,
Mhm.
especially like in my life, I was just like, oh my God, I can be an artist. Like I can just do this. I'm not just a business person because of
Mhm.
my degree. So
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Lori, I'm interested in hearing about do you have like a cutover of clientele between your previous business, in lingerie over into your jewelry, or do you kind of see it as two different segments that you're hitting because they're two different mediums?
I definitely think that there's a crossover there. They're both very dramatic and playful and glamorous. And so I definitely see that there's a crossover there. It's sort of building that audience again from scratch. It's been 10 years since I folded my label. So the the internet and the social media is totally different now than it was 10 years ago. So, but I still have people that I stay in touch with from my lingerie making days and also from when I was a trend writer for the intimates industry and being connected with that world. So, hoping to bring those two groups together.
Great. Well, nothing goes better with lingerie than jewelry. That's what I say.
Right?
Okay. Um, I'm curious for all of you. You guys have all kind of expressed kind of seasons or journeys in your art and like kind of overcoming adversity, whether that being figuring out what you're doing or, maybe health setbacks or, so can you kind of maybe whoever wants to go first share, maybe a tip that you have for emerging artists? Because I'm sure I can speak at least, maybe lacking the confidence or, you get a bad critique and you kind of just feel like you want to go hide in a hole. Like, how do you overcome that? Or how have you in the past?
Well, I'll jump in. Um, the regret of not doing it is so much more painful than actually doing it. I spent a lot of time really being afraid to step into my talent and my power and kept myself small because I was conditioned that that was what I needed to do as a woman in, the 80s and 90s. And so I see all of the young people here speaking as part of this panel, and it gives me so much hope and excitement for this new wave of talent who really has come into their own and feels, brave. So definitely the fear, the sense of regret is so much worse than doing it. Just do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd also pop in and kind of I think the use of the word season when you brought this question up, Amy, was interesting because I've lived life literally seasonally for about 10 years at this point. And it truly is the idea that everything has its season, right? Where, you're going to have periods of time where you feel productive and you feel you have the confidence and space to make, and periods that you don't and that you can't. But that the next season will always come, right? So that opportunity will be there, if you're open to it and if you find the space and make it happen. Yeah, it's always been a surprise, like where that journey takes you. But it's been interesting.
Take you to
At least,
helicopter rescue, it sounds like 3 times.
yeah, at least one.
Okay, Fernanda, do you have any kind of tips for the audience?
yes, well, those two were incredible answers, and I backed those up. Um, but yeah, I think one of my slides when of my rejection from Picosin, for example, said, "Don't take it personal." I feel like a lot of the times you just gotta shake it off and keep going and not look back. No, like truly staying true to like why you started and just utilizing your community, utilizing this advice that Lori and Bryce have given you, and just keep going.
Okay. Kristen, do you have any questions? Or I can go to my closing one, but
Oh gosh, let's see. I have a few. Um, I don't know. I guess one of the things that really struck me is Laurie's comment about how it's never too late to choose yourself and to choose your art. And I don't know that there's really a question there so much as I don't know, you all have talked about um, finding yourself at these crosshairs of opportunity and chance and like taking that chance on yourself. Um, how do you identify those moments in comparison to the ones where you're like, my gut's saying no, or um, this just isn't the right time as it turns out, or this season is the off season. Does anyone have thoughts on that?
For me, anyway, there's that quote about there's that moment where the caterpillar like has to break free because the pain of being confined is greater than the emergence. And so for me, these sort of lightning bolt moments of where I decided to take a chance were because I couldn't be confined anymore. And, I would take a huge leap forward and then I would sometimes end up pulling back. But every time that I took that huge leap, there were profound growing opportunities for me and really shaped me for the person that I am. And you realize that even though your life seems to go off on these like tangents, it's all the same path, the path of fascination that, from when you were young to where you are now. It's just cyclical and you just grow and evolve from that.
Yeah, adding to that, I feel like just staying curious and explorative, like I said, and just I like to mess around and find out, just be like, okay, what if I do this, what might the outcome be? And is it going to be better than my reality now? And most of the time it is. Until sometimes it isn't, but that's okay. It's better than the regret of not having done it. So,
Bryce, your piece about compounding error somehow comes to mind. I don't know if you're able to share that on screen again, but not
Yeah.
to suggest that there's error in, the choices that we make, but just kind of the journey of change over time and growth through change comes to mind when I think of that piece. And I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit more about it. What is the initial form and what, huh?
I want it to
Yeah.
be a narwhal. Please just tell me it's a narwhal.
And unfortunately, it is not a narwhal.
That's what I saw too.
It's a form that I've been playing with for a number of years at this point, or kind of versions of it. Um, it's kind of somewhere between bone, handle, tool, kind of a little bit of everything.
And we're talking about the far right,
The
correct?
far right.
Uh-huh.
Yep. And then it
Okay.
transitions all the way out from there.
So it's
Mhm.
like a formal exercise for you, like um, well, it sounds like it's also conceptual, but there's really curiosity in the form itself, sounds like.
Yeah, it's for me, it's yeah, this was it's a formal exercise, but this has also kind of become an interest for me in an exercise in memory and kind of thinking about the way that we access, like every time we access a memory, every time we access something, it alters it
Kind of
subtly
like
or
telephone
otherwise.
game. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that over time, suddenly it's not what it was.
And this
Um,
also reminds me of one of Laurie's slides where you're showing kind of the evolution of migration from one piece to another. Um, but before we go away from this, what happened to this piece? Are there things along the way that delighted you, surprised you, disappointed you? And
yeah, I guess I
uh-huh,
guess I happened to it.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
Um,
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
yeah. one of the biggest surprise, like kind of two surprises, two big ones that came from this. The first was about halfway through, where you can start to see the metal interact with the exterior of the frame. And it ends up actually burning the entire way out of it. So it frees itself from its constraint, to put it more poetically. Um, and then towards the end, kind of the major flashing event where I must have bumped the flask or done a poor job packing it. Because at that point I was a little bit loose and a little bit careless with it. Um, and it kind of exploded out of it and lost the form entirely towards the end. So those were both quite surprising to me, and especially it's hard to see in the back one, but it kind of turned almost figurative in a way. So kind of from
Huh.
bone to bone, bone to body, which was really exciting to kind of A, free myself from any expected outcome, but B, kind of see what exciting errors I had made.
Yeah, they look pretty exciting. That's a good way of putting it. Thank you for sharing again.
Yeah.
Laurie, are you able to share the slide that I'm thinking of that is a little bit similar, um, in which you were converting a piece from, I think you said like 3 inches down to more of a charm scale? Yeah. And I don't know if you want to comment on it. You're muted right now, but um, tell us a little bit about this process here. Is it, are these examples, or is there an iteration that we're seeing here?
So this is sort of an iteration. So when I had the opportunity to create a small charm, I revisited some of those little paper sculptures that I made. So, like I mentioned before, I did a whole series where I would, cut a strip that would be a 1/4 inch long by, I don't know, 8 or 10 inches, and 1/4 inch wide by 8 or 10 inches in length. And I would just manipulate to see what sort of exciting things might happen. And so I had some really fun forms. And so the form on the left there was from some early iterative play. And I realized, oh, this might be a good launching point. And so started figuring out how to scale, 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 but still keep that fluid dynamism that is exciting to me.
Mhm.
But it's the same process then with wax. So the wax there is just a wax sketch. And then I
Mhm.
ended up doing, a much more polished wax. But then when it came back, I nearly destroyed that one too, trying to get that really exciting moment for me. So it's a one-off.
Yeah, and so your process looks like receiving a casting and continuing to iterate on it based on your reaction to the result.
Yeah, like Bryce, I get really excited about like deconstructing things and not being too wedded to the outcome of it, looking for that sweet spot where intention and spontaneity come together. And you can't, for me anyway, I have difficulty sketching that out and making that happen. That's the most exciting part of making
Mm.
art for me. And so, yeah, I enjoy failing at creating pieces because usually it ends up being a launch point for something that's much more exciting.
Hmm.
Well, I
Interesting.
could take some help from you, Lori, because I've had so many professors tell me, like, you need to practice failing. I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Amy is not programmed for failing. But anyways, it's definitely, I think, a breakthrough that helps you kind of get to something greater.
Yeah. So Fernanda, I appreciate what you did with the time that you had. I I believe that we still have a little bit of time tonight, and I'm putting you on the spot if you choose to accept. Do you have any interest in showing us some of your work in addition to what you were able to share, given the focus of your talk? Are there pieces that come to mind from what you know of your own work, that might be relevant to the conversation we've been having. I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to share um, your work in addition to your story. So if you'd like to do any of that and just kind of off the cuff, informal, add your work to that discussion, by all means, feel free to screen share or
Or even in your
interject.
presentation, you definitely showed us some
Hmm.
pieces. I'm curious to hear more about them.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
let me do that. Let me share my presentation again. So I showed just a couple of them. There's definitely more from where this came from. Um, but well, just to shout out my interest in graphic design, I've been wanting just to like experiment more with drawing and stuff that is shown in a screen or graphic design in general. So that's why I made these little drawings of my pieces. Um, I'm hoping that this will take a part of my work later on. But a lot of what I did in Pocosin was just, and a lot of what I've done since the beginning is like trying to do my beadwork into jewelry and into metalworking. So I've made this cigarette a long time ago, and I perfected the form to this earrings that I'm wearing today. And I'm really just proud of getting to a place where I can be more excellent with my craft and the earring, all of the findings and my logo on top, I made with knowing my with my metalsmithing techniques. And I
That's
remember,
amazing.
yeah, when I was going to like classes back in the after the pandemic and stuff, a lot of the ladies that I would bead with, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, isn't that the dream to like know how to make your own findings and to be able to like put things together?" I feel like that's every beader's dream. So I'm just really proud to have gotten this design to that place, and I hope to keep doing it with more beads and metalworking. And a lot of my work, like Amy said, is trying to tell a story. So, for example, this bracelet down there, it is a cuff, and it just shares the story about when I was little and I used to live in Mexico. My grandma would be like, "Oh my God, somebody's outside. Go look who it is." So I would have to peek in through. So that little spot opening there is like a peek through for my eye tattoo that I got. Um, so I
That's
was,
amazing. So you and I have talked a little bit behind the scenes about this shape, and I made a ring using the same shape, and it was inspired by a building in Mexico where I was studying with Jesse Burt at the time in San Miguel de Allende. So
yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah, a lot of these shapes are shapes that grew up seeing and, part of fences. So just
Mhm.
incorporating that into my work and into the story, which also goes into this piece to the left, which is kind of hard to see in the cutout I made of it, but it goes in your nose and over your mouth. And if you look at my website, you can see pictures of it.
Mm.
And it's also talking about like this cage. It's called Kiss in a Cage and just being like not opening up fully to like a relationship or something because you have this like in front of you that is preventing you from like actually giving a kiss or something. So yeah, always tied to a story, always conceptual. I love conceptual work.
Amazing. And also harkens back to Laurie's uh, baby Laurie and her hairnet.
Little Lori, little Lori.
That was amazing. Oh my gosh. It's so
Are
cool
the
to learn
lips
about that trajectory too. Uh-huh.
are the lips cast? The one on the left?
Yes, so yes, that was part of my tour around the craft schools in Idlewild. I learned how to make a mold of my lips. And
Hmm.
then at Pocosin, I made a wax model and casted it into silver. And then at Touchstone, I did another different iteration of my lips.
Oh,
Yeah, always thinking about
Amazing.
lips and cages.
okay.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for speaking, to our lovely speakers as well as to everyone here listening. I want to just close out the series by thanking again our sponsors for the Emerging Artist Speaker Series, Art Jewelry Forum and Rio Grande Jewelry Supply. And I do want to just remind everyone of what Kristen mentioned, a couple of the snippets. We do have our symposium coming up in October. We also have the Shining Wave exhibit, the tribute to Philip Baldwin, coming up. The opening is this Sunday at Danica Design Gallery in Seattle, as well as you can check out the pieces on Danica Design's website as well. We also have the Established Artist Grant. Applications will be opening at the end of the month. We alternate every other year between emerging and established artists. So this year's established artist. And then finally, the speaker fund link that Kristen had added in the chat. Please do we'd appreciate any donations you have. All those funds go directly to our speakers. So um,
Thank
and
you. And I did just share in the chat also a link to our survey. It's real brief. We just want to hear from you. If you enjoyed our series, if you have feedback on how we might improve it, we're all ears. We'd really love to hear from you. Whether you're a speaker or a coach in our series or participant viewing. I do want to thank our coaches as well. It can be hard to know it because we don't talk about them a lot, but we did offer a number of coaches to our speakers that they could leverage their skills and experience in refining their talks before presenting to you. So thank you to those folks behind the scenes who made a difference.
And finally, this event has been recorded, and so we'll be posting it on our Seattle Metals Guild events YouTube channel. So I think Kristen's going to pop a link in the chat as well for that. So if you loved it so much the first time, I bet you it's going to be even better the second time if you want to see it again, or any of our other speakers from the previous 3 events.
There you go. I put it in a link to our playlist for the series right there in the
Oh,
chat.
okay.
So yeah, keep your eye out for this event, which we'll be posting soon.
Great. So that brings us to a close for the 2025 season, believe it or not. And hopefully we'll see you again next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much to Amy for being our amazing MC throughout the series as well, and for all of you for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.